Ilara had spent years convincing herself the glass eyes were just reflecting the moonlight. There were 12 of them porcelain dolls with lace collars and frozen painted smirks lined up on the shelf facing her bed. Her grandmother had called them the Watchers, claiming they kept nightmares at bay. But as Ilara grew older, the nightmares became the dolls themselves. One Tuesday she decided she'd had enough. She turned every single doll around so their backs were to her. "No more staring, Underslash," she whispered, clicking off the lamp. She lay in the dark, the silence of the old house pressing against her ears. She felt a surge of triumph until she heard it. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was the sound of stiff, tiny porcelain feet pivoting on a wooden shelf. One by one, in perfect synchronization. Ilara froze. She didn't dare reach for the light. She kept her eyes squeezed shut, praying the morning would come. But then she felt the subtle shift in the room. The air grew heavier, smelling of attic dust and mothballs. She remembered the quote she'd once read for Ita Antranskar. She didn't mind the dolls watching her sleep. It was the way they all looked at the door the moment she closed her eyes that kept her awake. Slowly, painfully, she cracked one eyelid. The dolls hadn't turned back to look at her. They were still facing away. But they weren't looking at the wall anymore. They were all leaning forward, their stiff necks craned at impossible angles, staring intently at the bedroom door. Then from the hallway came the sound of a heavy, wet footstep. Thump! The bedroom door handle began to turn, slow and deliberate. Ilara realized with a jolt of pure ice why the dolls were called the Watches. They weren't the ones she should have been afraid of. They were just keeping track of what was coming for her.
The garden of rusted chimes, the move to the edge of the Blackwood district, was supposed to be a fresh start for Linda. She loved the sprawling ivy and the heavy Victorian curtains, but she had not anticipated the settling sounds of a house built so close to a graveyard. It was not just the house that settled. One evening, Linda was hanging a set of silver wind chimes on the back porch. The air was dead still, not a breath of wind to stir the trees. Yet as she turned to go inside, the chimes erupted into a frantic, dissonant, shattered glass sound. She spun around. The chimes were not blowing in the wind. They were being held by something. Pale, dirt-stained hand reached through the gaps in the porch railing. Its long, jagged fingernails flicking the silver tubes. Linda froze, her breath hitching in her throat. Slowly, a head rose from the shadows beneath the floorboards. It was a man, or what used to be one. His skin was the color of wet ash, and his eyes were wide, milky orbs that seemed to leak darkness. He did not climb up. He simply uncoiled, his limbs moving with the sickening crunch of breaking dry wood. "Linda," he wheezed, the sound vibrating through the very soles of her feet. "You are standing on my roof." Linda backed away, her hand fumbling for the door handle. I bought this house. It is mine." The creature leaned over the railing, his face inches from the screen door. Low, bubbling chuckle came from his throat. "The deed is for the dirt, Linda, but the space belongs to the first tenant. And I have been waiting a century for someone with such vibrant skin to move in." He pressed his face against the screen, the mesh bulging inward. As Linda bolted the door, she heard the sound of 100 tiny metallic clicks. She looked at the porch. The wind chimes had not just stopped, had been pulled through the floorboards, disappearing into the dark crawl space where the cemetery roots met the foundation. That night, as Linda lay in bed, she did not hear the wind. She heard the faint, muffled, ting-ting-ting silver chimes coming from directly beneath her mattress. He was in her bedroom.
The doll that didn't want to play. The first thing Ilars noticed about the doll was its weight. It was too heavy for a toy dense, like a waterlogged branch. It had been his daughter's favourite for weeks, a porcelain-faced antique he'd found at a garage sale. He called it Miss Clara. His daughter Lily called it the quiet friend. At first it was just little things. He would leave Lily's room and find the doll's glass eyes tracked toward the door. Then the scratching started. A rhythmic dry sound like fingernails on a chalkboard coming from the toy chest at 3 a.m. One night the monitor crackled to life. Elias heard Lily whispering, her voice trembling. "I don't want to go to the basement, Clara, it's cold." A pause. Then a voice that wasn't Lily's, a wet, raspy sound like air escaping a punctured lung, replied, "The basement is where we keep the new skin." Elias sprinted to the room. The door was locked from the inside. Through the wood he heard the heavy thud drag of something small and weighted moving across the floor. "Lily, open the door!" he screamed. Silence. When he finally kicked the door off its hinges, the room was empty. The window was locked. The toy chest was open. Miss Clara sat in the centre of Lily's bed, her porcelain face now sporting a tiny, jagged crack across the cheek. Elias looked closer. Behind the crack wasn't more porcelain. It was pink, wet tissue. Then the doll's head slowly rotated 180 degrees. It blinked, not with a plastic click, but with a soft, moist squelch. "You're too big," the doll whispered, its mouth staying perfectly still. "But you'll do for the stuffing." Elias felt a cold, small hand wrap around his ankle from under the bed. It wasn't a hand, it was a porcelain grip that felt like a vice. And as he was dragged into the dark, he saw Lily standing in the corner, her eyes fixed and glassy, her skin starting to harden into a white ceramic shell.
The humidity in the air is the first thing you notice, thick, cold, and smelling of damp earth. You are driving a deserted back road at midnight, when your headlights catch a figure standing in the center of the lane. You slam on the brakes, skidding to a halt inches from a woman in the tattered white dress. She does not move. She just stares through the windshield with eyes that look like shattered glass. Terrified, you shift into reverse, but the engine stalls. The cabin lights flicker on, then off. In that brief flash of light, you see her reflection in the rear-view mirror. She is not in front of the car anymore. She is in the back seat. She leans forward, her cold breath smelling of stagnant well water, and whispers, "You are driving too fast." We are going to miss the turn to the cemetery. Then you feel a cold, thin hand wrap around your gear shift, forcing the car into drive. So she's now taking you to a graveyard to take your soul. Say goodbye, because for you it's over. She's taking you to hell, and there is nothing you can do about it.
Lock your doors. Do not answer if you hear someone whispering Latin through the wood. Cover your mirrors. I looked in my rear-view mirror as I drove away, and she was sitting in my back. When I screamed and looked back, the seat was empty, but the leather was ice cold. I just got home, and there's a muddy, barefoot print on my welcome mat. It looks like a human foot, but the toes are way too long. If anyone sees her, do not look at her eyes. I think that's how she hooks you. I can still see those glowing yellow orbs every time I blink.